Hello, hello, how are you? How you doing? Hope you're doing well. Right. Yes, my microphone is working. I had a sudden momentary panic. Is my microphone working? Because for some reason I seem to keep on forgetting to check that one thing. So, what's up? It's Monday. The weather is nice outside now, but it started off terrible this morning. We had lots and lots of wind and heaps and heaps of really heavy rain, to the point where one of the things that sometimes happens at our house when it gets really rainy and the wind is coming from that side of the house is the rain comes in around some of the windows, runs across the floor and forms a great big puddle in the middle of the living room. Thankfully, we have a concrete floor, not carpet or timber floors or anything like that that are going to get damaged by it. But it's just sort of a little disconcerting when you walk out into the middle of the living room in the middle of the night, expecting to go and get yourself a glass of water or something, and you see, hopefully you see it before you walk into it, this great big puddle. So it's like go off and get the towels and mop it up so it doesn't sort of build up too much. And thankfully it eased enough that it wasn't going to continue and cause problems. The other thing that's happened here, I mean, that wasn't so much of an event, was it really? But hey, doesn't matter. The other thing that's happened here for me, which I'm really happy about, is I actually now have my book stand, which means that I don't have to prop my iPad mini up on a little plant pot that I have, which was kind of the right height, and hope and pray, fingers crossed, everything else like that, that it wouldn't slide down and go crash onto my keyboard or anything else like that, which it had done a couple of times. So that arrived this morning, and I'm delighted. I've managed to get that part of my desk clear enough that it works. It fits really well. It works really well, and it's like, yay, getting there. Anyway, so one day I'll get the microphone stand sorted out, and then when I'm actually leaning against my desk or typing, you're not going to be drowned out by the noise of it, even if I am still reading at the same time. So, what do we need to do? I need to unlock my book that I'm going to be reading. And the reference to iPad mini is because I have a very old first generation iPad mini that I use as my ebook reader, and it's great because it can't really do anything else. It still holds a charge reasonably well. I can go online to Project Gutenberg, which I will give you the link for in just a moment. I can go online to Project Gutenberg and find public domain books that I want to read to you specifically. Go specifically and look for the books that I want to read you, and if they have it, then I can download it to this iPad mini, and it will still show me using the built-in Books app that is part of it. Now, I talk about it as being really old because it's the first generation iPad mini, but on top of that, I can't really install any new apps on it because they require newer versions of the operating system. And also it doesn't take updates anymore. And the only reason why that isn't a problem security-wise is the only time it's online is when I go to Project Gutenberg and download a book. So there you go. I love the fact that I can actually still use it, that I'm keeping it out of the landfill or having to try and find an electronics recycler. I'm a little bit dubious about some of the ones that claim that they do recycling, because I've heard stories about stuff supposedly being sent off to be recycled when in actual fact it's being sent overseas and it gets trashed. So the longer we can keep it out of the waste system, the better. Anyway, so that's the first of the bits of information that I thought you might actually be able to make use of in some way. I don't know why, just randomly, because the second is I have 3 tips for you if you are no, I'm going to introduce myself to you. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's books because who else is going to read them to you? Honestly, there's not a lot of them around anymore. They're not in a lot of public libraries anymore, just because they're not new enough, they're not getting enough book traffic. And so therefore the libraries will withdraw them unless they are absolute classics. And so that actually eliminates a lot of old books that are actually really worth reading. A lot of fun. One of the things that's I find very important with old books is that they help me to think about the world as it used to be. Because when an author is writing, even if they're writing absolute fantasy that's not based in their own current world at the time of their writing, the world view that they have comes to play in the story that they write, the way they use their language, the attitudes towards gender roles and people's purpose for being and all that sort of stuff. The way they, I already said language, all that sort of thing actually is part of what you get out of reading an old-fashioned book. Now, there will be aspects of attitudes towards other genders. Actually, no, not really other genders in the books that we read from those eras, because they weren't aware of the possibilities. Aspects of social attitude towards genders, gender roles, different races and nationalities, that will come up in the things that we read. And if it were a modern book, we would say inappropriate. Because it's an old book written from a different era, we accept the fact that they had different attitudes. We can learn from the fact that they had different attitudes, because if we go around completely blinkered to anything apart from what we consider to be appropriate now, and the way the world currently is, which actually isn't always the things that we really want it to be and think appropriate now, we will actually miss out. And by actually being aware of these other things and seeing how they fitted into the society that they came from, and seeing how it didn't actually work that well, it helps to reinforce our reasoning behind this is good, this isn't good, instead of just being told this is the attitude you ought to have. We can see the consequences of some of those attitudes in some of the books that we read, all that sort of thing. Anyway, so I'm going to say hi, Goriki. Great to have you here. Goriki is one of the readers in Codex, which is a fantastic group of people who read public domain books online for you to be able to get the most out of. I've got the logo for it down there in the bottom right-hand corner of my overlay. If you're watching this on Twitch, if you're watching it on YouTube, I have yet to get it up there for you. I'm so sorry. I shall try and remember the command I need to give you. And see, yes, there you go. So Codex, as I said, are a great group of people who read public domain books, probably for various reasons that are similar to the ones I do. Also, it means that if you're reading a public domain book, you're not going to get in trouble for breaking someone else's copyrights. And I don't think it's appropriate, because effectively you're stealing from them. An author who has written something has put a lot of work into it, and we need to acknowledge that, especially if there's someone who's still alive and is trying to make a living off it. That's important. But also their descendants, the people who actually still hold the copyright, if it's within the copyright terms. I don't think it's appropriate to actually go into somebody's house and take something that belongs to them that they've worked hard for. So why should I think that it's appropriate to do the same with the efforts that they have put in from their mind with creating collections of words that we appreciate because they become stories that we read. So there you go. That's what unites us, is our love of stories that are in the public domain and being willing to share them with you. Now, the group of people that make up Codex are very diverse. We have people who are teachers, we have people who are, among other things, they are actors, voice actors, and even audiobook readers. And then in their spare time, purely because they enjoy doing it, I would guess, because there's not a lot else that you get out of it. They actually read books online so that you can enjoy them. So if you are wanting to find out more about them, I've put the link in the chat over there for you on the right hand side of the screen for Codex's Discord. And if you want to actually, when I've finished reading, preferably when I've finished reading, not while I'm reading, if you look down below the video window, you'll actually see a list with the links of the other readers of Codex here on Twitch, and you'll be able to go and please do go and follow them. Make sure that you go and listen to them from time to time and stuff like that. They all read completely different books from each other. Sometimes we'll double up on things like that. Somebody else is reading, or was just recently reading, The Secret Garden, which is one that I read months and months ago. In fact, if you're wanting to see any of the stories that I've read previously, any of the books, please go to my YouTube channel and go to the playlists. And when you're over there, you will be able to have a look through all the different books I've read and just listen to your heart's content. So I'm just going to mute my microphone for a minute because I actually have to concentrate on something, okay? Right, here we go. I'm trying to think of if there's anything else I would normally say. Oh yes, if you're new here, I usually have 3 tips that I give out. And in a minute, when I've finished all that sort of stuff, I'll tell you about the picture that's behind me. So the 3 tips are, and the only reason I mention it being for people who are new here is everybody else has heard this so many times before. So the first tip is make sure you have something to drink, and definitely top of your list, make sure you have water available, because water keeps your brain and your body functioning well. So if you like other things to drink, please feel free. I am not the drinks police. I also have coffee with me today. Currently it's black coffee because I've run out of milk. Anyway, long black. So first tip is something to drink. Second tip is something to eat, snacks. You need to have snacks. You need to feed yourself. You need to feed your brain. You need to have something that you can do with your mouth and your hands and your body while you're listening, because it means it's easier to actually focus and listen. Why not? And stories are so much more fun when you have something to drink and something to snack on. So I've got some crackers today. No cheese. I'm in the tail end of a headache, so I'm trying to eat very, very simple things at the moment until that passes. So that's why I'm also not quite so well lit on my right hand side, is just because the extra bright lights that I use when I'm streaming can be a little bit uncomfortable if you're in the middle of a headache. And I don't want to be back in the middle of a headache. I want it to be out of the way. So tip 1, drinks. Tip 2, snacks. Tip 3, and I am prepared, somewhere comfortable to sit. And I say I am prepared because usually I have to fish around on the floor and I disappear out of sight. Just a wee heads up, I am undiagnosed but very definitely have ADHD and also autism spectrum disorder. So that gives us a whole lot of extra levels of fun when we're reading. So I will get distracted super easily. Halfway through a sentence that I am reading to you, with my eyes on the sentence, I can lose my place. That's almost a superpower. I don't know if you can do that, but I can. And it happens often, and it doesn't bother me. It's a lot of fun, actually, just sort of like, sometimes it's because my mind has gone off in some direction with information we have in the middle of a sentence, and I'm trying to remember whereabouts I know this information from, or if you people are likely to actually know what it is I'm reading out to you at the moment, and if I think it's going to be something I can find a picture of or find a definition of to be able to share with you. And so then when I've got my brain back on track, I then have to try and find whereabouts I got to on the page and in the sentence, and that can sometimes be a little bit hair-raising, but lots of fun. It also means that I have a tendency in myself to do deep dives into information. I love finding out about stuff. Dry old boring things where it doesn't have any relevance for me, not so much. But for me, I have found out about so many things just because of the fact that I love reading. Because I will read a story and they will mention a place, or they'll mention a person, or they'll mention someone doing something, and I'll be intrigued and wondering what that's about, and so I'll look it up. And one of the things that I thought that was normal, and then I discovered when I was at school and ready to leave school and had just left school, that a lot of people had this attitude that once you've finished school, that's it, you don't have to learn anything anymore. Like formal learning, but you don't have to intensely learn anything anymore. So when they're on their job, they would learn how to do their job because they'd just got a new job and they'd not done it before. That sort of learning they're okay with. But actually sitting down and looking, now we would look at a website, then we would have looked at a book to read about something to find out about it. It was just gone. No, don't need to do that anymore, because for them, learning about stuff was such a horrible, hard task. Whereas for me, it's like, yay, what other information can I find out about that? And where does that take me? And all these other bits of things. So all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's fun. It's a fun ride. We are currently reading The Story of the Amulet by Edith Nesbit. Now that's the third book in the Psammead series. Last time I tried to call it the third book in the Bastable series, I think. That's another series of 3 books that Edith Nesbit has written. Quite different, but some similar characteristics between the children and the stories. There's a tendency for her children to have good intentions and then get into trouble somehow for it. In fact, actually, if I admit to it, honestly, a lot of the stories we read from other authors as well have this in them. And I think part of it is because a lot of the stories I read are written in the Edwardian period rather than the Victorian period. So they'd come from society having a very structured system, and this was okay and that wasn't okay. They wouldn't have even considered using a word like that, like okay, even though it didn't exist then. It would have, if it did exist, it would have been too much slang. For the sector of society that were the ones who were writing books and reading books and giving books to their children. Books that were written for children in the Victorian era tended to be ones to improve them, to improve their behaviour, to help them to be better people and all that sort of stuff. A whole lot of bunkum. Anyway, so when we get to the Edwardian period, there's a little bit more leeway there, not with all of them, but with some of the authors. So we've noticed in reading the various series by Edith Nesbit that often she will start she'll talk about a situation and there will be typical gender roles in the situation. So one of the previous books in this series, the children ended up having to kind of look after themselves for an evening, and so they had got themselves sorted out for something to eat because there was something there. And then it was time to clean up afterwards. And so there was reference to the girls doing the dishes, but not the boys. But the author actually highlighted this about the boys just sort of having a little bit of spare time to twiddle their thumbs and wonder about what they were going to do. But a little bit later in the same chapter, she actually puts in there that the boys got bored and so they went off and helped, and the girls were very appreciative of it, and the boys actually discovered that it wasn't such an onerous thing to do after all. And why should it have to be a girl's job? So often there is this element of, I'm not sure what you call it, where you have, it's slightly subversive, that's the word. Slightly subversive, so she will go along with what was currently acceptable at the time, and yet she'll still bring in threads of opportunity for change in individuals, but also within society. So we get a lot of that sort of thing happening in our stories, but also we get a lot of consequences. So all of the Psammead series is about the children getting opportunities to be able to wish for things and literally having those wishes come true. And the children initially think this is wonderful, they're going to be able to do this and do that and not worry about whether they've got money whether they've still got money from having received some as a gift. But then they discover that if you are not very specific about what you wish for, you will literally get what you ask for, but it doesn't turn out quite like you expected. the actual wish, the result of the wish comes out differently, and also your responses to it therefore are going to be different. So I think that's enough talking about it. Let's get on with reading the story. This is only our second time reading the story of the amulet, and I think it's time that we should get on with it. Yes, we've talked enough. Let's read. Oh, and that was the other thing which I forgot to mention for those who are new here. I do talk like this at the beginning, and I talk a little bit like this at the very end of the story, just sort of saying goodbye and commenting on things if something really struck me. If we are reading more than one chapter, I'll often chat in between. If you are wanting to chat in the chat box over there on Twitch, please feel free to do so. That's great. I love it when people want to talk together about things. And sometimes we have lots of people here chatting, and sometimes we only have one or two people just lurking and listening. And lurking is great because stories are great when you can sit and listen instead of having to actually get involved with discussions because the teacher said so. And I'm not the teacher, so that doesn't happen. But if you want to actually contribute to what I'm saying, what I'm reading and what I'm saying, if you think that there's something that I have mispronounced or you say it differently to whatever everybody else does, it sounds like Goriki is now lurking. Having said that they impersonate a cricket, that's a great idea. So, yeah, if you want to lurk officially, you can actually put in !lurk, no spaces, no capitals, LURK, and it'll just tell you something about it. And if you have anything to contribute, then you're most welcome to say something. You're most welcome to type in an explanation for something if it seems like I'm stuck on a word or a concept or something like that comes up in the story. Not something that's really elaborate because I'm not very good at recognising those. And if I manage to catch it out of the corner of my eye, I will read that out so that those who are listening who aren't able to necessarily see the chat, like those over on YouTube, because the chat doesn't get transferred over there, then I will read that out for them so that they have that explanation. And also I have that information because I like finding out the information. So, right, what am I going to do now? I think I should read a book. I'm just looking at all the various things that are appearing in chat that Goriki's putting in, and I'm like, okay, am I meant to be saying anything about that at the moment? I'm not sure. Yes, no, I don't actually have pronounce written as a command on my channel yet. That's never stopped me telling other people how to pronounce things. I'll probably carry on saying it the way that I usually do. But if you have your own way of saying something and it's always amused you that other people say it differently, then that's okay too. It's always good to have a bit of fun. So let's get on with reading. It's on my stand, my book stand. I should show it to you, shouldn't I? Yeah, I know, I'm meant to be reading. Here you go, this is my book stand. I think it's really cool. This is my book stand. See? And it folds up, and it's just a bit bigger than A4 size. This middle bit here is where all the bars are, is the same size as a normal piece of printer paper here in New Zealand, which is the size that we call A4, and I love it. And it's made out of beechwood, except for the very bottom board and the height adjustment bar. But I love it because I can choose what angle it sits at, and I don't have to worry about my iPad landing on my keyboard and accidentally commanding all sorts of things that it shouldn't do. Yes, I can. It's got 3 different angles that I can set it up at, and it's got little wee push-up page holding things, which if you've got a really determined book that wants to turn pages, it's going to sort of get part way there because the base that those tabs sit on is about that wide, and so the tab sits up at the front of that and your book's at the back of it. But anyway, all those sort of things. I might even put a picture of it over in Codex for those who might be interested in. Yes, there are such things as determined books. Those brand new ones. I don't get books like that. I get old books from the second-hand shop. It's another great thing to do, actually, is to keep them out of the landfill. If they're the sort of book you like, but don't bother getting them if you don't. It's just not worth it. You don't need clutter. Get stuff that you like, that you think you're going to appreciate and have around you. You can read it or not read it, your choice, but don't just get it because it's a book and you then feel guilty about it. Whatever. So let's read The Story of the Amulet by Edith Nesbit. We are reading chapter 2, The Half Amulet. And before I read, yet another thing, I realised just the other day, after I had finished reading the first bit about it, and hi, Books, Brews and Booze, I'm glad you're here. Sorry about that, not saying anything to you before. Yeah, it was the bit about the comment about the cricket impersonates Goriki impersonating a cricket, that basically my brain, while I was talking, said, oh, that's a weirdo command that's come up because Goriki said pronounce, rather than me recognising that you also are here. Books, Brews and Booze is also in our in Codex group. So here we go. I was showing you this picture. I didn't realise that these illustrations were in this book. Now, some of the other books we've read by Edith Nesbit have also had illustrations by H.R. Miller, and I did actually have his name, Henry Robert or something like that. I can't remember. And the ebook version that I have has four terrible numbers today, has 4 illustrations, I think. 2 of them are basically symbols and patterns. One of them is some stitch work, and then I can't remember what the 4th one is, but it's like, oh, this is disappointing, because I've seen all these other books that we've read of hers, and they always have these wonderful illustrations, and almost all of them have illustrations done by this chap here, Mr. Miller. And so I was incredibly disappointed. And then I found that Wikidata, I think it's Wikidata, actually has the book there, and it has the illustrations in it. So there you go. I'm sharing the illustrations with you. This is the one where the children are having a wander in the city, and this is the bookshop with all the pet shop, which has all of these cages with the various animals in, which is where they actually rediscover the Psammead. And I'm just going to have a quick look and see if there was actually another picture from the same first chapter that we missed. No, there wasn't. So that's all right. I shall get it ready for the next actual illustration when we get to it. And I was also going to tell you, yes, we're getting to the actual story very soon. I was also going to tell you about this picture behind us. The picture behind me is of Fitzroy Street in London at the time around about when the book was published, which is actually also the setting for when the children are having this adventure. So the period is referred to as the Edwardian period, because it came after the Victorian period, and Edward was then king, I suppose. And so, as you can see, horses and carts all over the place. This is 1910. This is a photograph, a colorized photograph of that same street, part of it, from 1910, which is 6 years after the book was published. And so there's the other side of the street. So you've got over here you've got a lot of these will be things like hansom cabs, which we would use a taxi these days. They used a hansom. Some of those are just carriages and stuff like that anyway, but usually this boxy look here and here, that would be a hansom cab. So it's your way of getting somewhere. You have a person who drives it, they have a horse or a pair of horses that pull it, and you hop in, tell them where you want to go, and they take you there, just the same as you do with a taxi, and then you pay. These are probably gas street lights, so they would have had a gas lighter, the lamp lighter going around, and probably also a lamp lighter would have to come around in the morning and put them out. Someone over here with a sandwich board. So one end of Fitzroy Street was really busy with it was near where there were shops and other central things. The other end of Fitzroy Street was a lot more residential, and in the middle you have Fitzroy Square, which is actually a little, you've got 4 streets that form it, so therefore it's a square, but these days, I don't know about back then, it's got a circular park in the middle. So that's kind of the setting of where the children were going to be staying with the person that they refer to as old nurse. So she used to look after them when they were younger. As you can see, now you look at Fitzroy Street, part of it is quite fancy and part of it is a bit scruffy with the little brick replacement apartment buildings and stuff like this. And you can see here with the type of awnings and stuff like that, some of it would have been like this house here on the corner. That would have been quite fancy. But where Nurse was living with them, old Nurse was living, she would not have probably had a whole house. She would have had an apartment. What in New Zealand or even in England would often get called a flat, where you have a floor or part of a floor with bedrooms and stuff like that. Although back in those days, at this level of society, you would have had more rooms than what these days we would have in the same sort of place, just because that was normal. That was how it was. That was how you lived. You'd had a kitchen, a parlour, a dining room, and bedrooms and utility rooms. So let's get on with reading. And wonderful that Goriki actually possibly has this book in their to-do list for your own personal reading or for reading out loud. I'm wondering. This, as I said before, this is the 3rd book of the trilogy. So if it's on your to read out loud list, then I'm guessing that you've actually read some of the other ones as well. And personally, I get most of my books from secondhand bookshops, especially, we call them op shops, opportunity shops. The English call them charity shops, I think. And I can't remember what the Americans call them. The first book in the series is called 5 Children and It, and the particular series is called the Psammead series, Psammead. It's often just referred to as the nickname of this collection of 3 books. I'm trying to think what the other name is. I usually can rattle off all 3 translations of the same thing, but a place where you go and you get secondhand books, but it's done as a fundraiser for some charity or whatever. So in New Zealand, we call those an op shop, from the term opportunity shop. And yes, each of them, like some of them are set up by churches, some of them are set up by things like our local hospice. That's one of their fundraisers, and the shop's always open. It's all secondhand goods, and you find all sorts of things. Books, clothes, kitchen goods, everything. If you ever move city and you can't afford to take everything with you, often the op shop is the best place to start. And I love the fact that the different things you end up with often have great stories behind them. It just adds to the feel of continuity. And I think that's partly what I like with old books too, actually, and reading them. So we're going to get on with this. Sorry, too much chat. Chapter 2 of The Story of the Amulet by Edith Nesbit. I'm just looking across at my clock on my other. Sorry about that. Chapter 2, The Half Amulet. Because the book is called The Story of the Amulet. We haven't come across it yet, have we? This is odd. Now, background to the story, the children's father is away in Manchuria because he is reporting for the newspaper he writes for on the war that's going on over there. And apparently this war was between the Chinese and the Russians, or maybe the Japanese and the Russians, because Manchuria as a territory, even though it's actually physically part of China and was meant to be Chinese, the Japanese actually at one stage took control of it and used it as a puppet state. So I'm not quite sure. I haven't looked up that bit of history. I don't know if I'm going to or not. I'm not going to now. Anyway, so father's not in England with the children. Mother has been sent away to Madeira for a rest break because she is probably a little overtired from looking after the children, keeping up with them all, but also getting father ready to go off on this trip, and maybe also being a bit worried. So she's taken the youngest of the family, the one they call the lamb, with her. Now, Madeira, if you're not aware of it, is a territory of Portugal, but it's off in the Atlantic, off the coast of Morocco, North Africa. You've got the Canaries, and the Canaries are part of Spain, governance-wise, not physically. You've got Madeira, which is north of there, which is part of Portugal, and then further across into the Atlantic, and I'm trying to draw it in direction for you, is the Azores, which is also part of Portugal. So that's where Mother is, probably because the time of year and that sort of thing, it would be reasonably cheap being there once you're over there, and all because it wasn't a major tourist destination, and also warm, because often if people were run down, they needed to go somewhere where they didn't have to work, they didn't have to worry about anything, and they could just lie in the warmth of the climate that they were in, and it was considered to be something that would help to restore health. And I think we've sometimes forgotten that sometimes you need to just stop, take a break, and soak in the atmosphere of somewhere that's pleasant. I think that's partly why people go away on a cruise, but usually when they go away on a cruise, they're not going for long enough to have that effect. Anyway, I shall carry on. Chapter 2, The Half Amulet. Long ago, that is to say last summer, the children, finding themselves embarrassed by some wish which the Psammead had granted them, and which the servants had not received in a proper spirit, had wished that the servants might not notice the gifts which the Psammead gave. Oh yes, I remember that, and it meant that there were some complications, as there usually were. And when they parted from the Psammead, their last wish had been that they should meet it again. Therefore, they had met it, because of having made a wish. And it was jolly lucky for the Psammead, as Robert pointed out, because they were able to just rescue him from this pet seller. Now, of course, you see that the Psammead's being where it was the consequence of one of their wishes, and as such could not be noticed by the servants. Ooh. The fact that he's with them is because they wished to see him again, or it. The story refers to it as it. It comes across as more masculine than feminine to me. And so therefore the servants are not going to notice that the Psammead is there, because of the condition of this early wish of theirs. And it was soon plain that in the Psammead's opinion, old Nurse was still a servant, although she had now a house of her own, for she never noticed the Psammead at all, and that was as well, for she would never have consented to allow the girls to keep an animal and a bath of sand under their bed. Now the Psammead is a sand fairy, so therefore when they rescued him, brought him home, he was not feeling very well and had a bit of rough treatment, and so one of the things they did was they got some silver sand for him, put it into an old bathtub, and let him. It's like a chicken having a dust bath, where they actually refresh their skin, get rid of any little bugs and stuff that are bothering them, and it soothes them with the silver sand. And I had a look at that after I got off reading last time. Silver sand is sand that is very, very clean. It's a particular style of sand in England. It's largely quartz based, so it has this more silvery look, because most of the sand that they have over there has been dug from a sand quarry or a sand pit, such as where they found him in the first place, the Psammead, and it has iron oxide on it, and often clay as well. They'll often wash the clay off if it's going to be used for building purposes, but it still has this iron oxide. Now, iron oxide we know of as rust, but it's also forms kind of like a light coating on the grains of the sand, and so therefore it stains everything that touches it in the way of clothing. So I remember being in England with our children. There was a pile of sand that was there for doing some work, and in New Zealand, yeah, okay, as long as it doesn't look like there's been a dog relieving them or a cat relieving themselves in it. The kids can play on it as long as they don't spread the sand out too much, because the builders get annoyed with that because it gets extra stones and stuff it shouldn't have. So, but we were told, don't let the children play in there unless you're okay with their clothing being stained, and also sometimes you can get it on your skin too. So that was why, is because it wasn't silver sand. I had not come across the term before because they never referred to silver sand. They were just talking about trade sand. But that's what the girls, what they had got for the Psammead. And now they have a bath, a tin bath, under the bed with sand in it. That's his place. He likes hiding in his sand. Anyway, when breakfast had been cleared away, it was a very nice breakfast with hot rolls to it, a luxury quite out of the common way. Anthea went and dragged out the bath and woke the Psammead. It stretched and shook itself. You must have bolted your breakfast most unwholesomely, it said. You can't have been 5 minutes over it. We've been nearly an hour, said Anthea. Come, you know you promised. Now, look here, said the Psammead, sitting back on the sand and shooting out its long eyes suddenly. It's got eyes on stalks, a little bit like snails do. We'd better begin as we mean to go on. It won't do to have any misunderstanding, so I tell you plainly that— Oh, please, Anthea pleaded, do wait till we get to the others. They'll think it most awfully sneakish of me to have talked to you without them. Do come down, there's a dear. She knelt before the sand bath and held out her arms. The Psammead must have remembered how glad it had been to jump into those same little arms only the day before, for it gave a little grudging grunt and jumped once more. Anthea wrapped it in her pinafore and carried it downstairs. It was welcomed in a thrilling silence. At last Anthea said, Now then, what place is this? Asked the Psammead, shooting its eyes out and turning them slowly round. It's a sitting room, of course, said Robert. Then I don't like it, said the Psammead. Last time they had been in their playroom, which was in the basement. Never mind, said Anthea kindly. We'll take you anywhere you like if you want us to. What was it you were going to say upstairs when I said the others wouldn't like it if I stayed talking to you without them? It looked keenly at her, and she blushed. Don't be silly, it said sharply. Of course, it's quite natural that you should like your brothers and sisters to know exactly how good and unselfish you were. So that's what it was going to say. I wish you wouldn't, said Jane. Anthea was quite right. What was it you were going to say when she stopped you? I'll tell you, said the Psammead. Since you're so anxious to know, I was going to say this. You've saved my life. And I'm not ungrateful, but it doesn't change your nature or mine. You're still very ignorant and rather silly. And I am worth 1,000 of you any day of the week. Of course you are, said Anthea, beginning to say, but it interrupted her. It's very rude to interrupt, it said. And what I mean is that I'm not going to stand any nonsense, and if you think what you've done is to give you the right to pet me or make me demean myself by playing with you, you'll find out that what you think doesn't matter a single penny. See, that's what I think that matters. I know, said Cyril. It always was, if you remember. The Psammead had set down some rules. They were not to treat him like a pet and pat him and things like that. For some reason, apparently, there was a tendency, but probably because it's a little bit fuzzy or furry. It's a rather odd-looking creature. Well, said the Psammead, then that's settled. We're to be treated as we deserve. We, the royal we, I think. I with respect, and all of you with— But I don't wish to be offensive. Do you want me to tell you how I got into that horrible den you brought me out of? Oh, I'm not ungrateful. I haven't forgotten it, and I shan't forget it. Do tell us, said Anthea. I know you're awfully clever, but even with all your cleverness, I don't believe you can possibly know how respectfully we do respect you, don't we? The others all said yes and fidgeted in their chairs. Robert spoke the wishes of all when he said, I do wish you'd go on. So it sat up on the green-covered table and went on. When you'd gone away, it said, I went to sand for a bit and slept. It's its normal place to go. I was tired out with all your silly wishes, and I felt as though I hadn't really been to sand for a year. To sand? Jane repeated. Where I sleep. You go to bed, I go to sand. Jane yawned. The mention of bed made her feel sleepy. All right, said the Psammead in offended tones. I'm sure I don't want to tell you a long tale. A man caught me, and I bit him. And he put me in a bag with a dead hare and a dead rabbit, and he took me to his house and put me out of the bag into a basket with holes that I could see through. And I bit him again, and then he brought me to the city, which I am told is called the modern Babylon, though it's not a bit like the old Babylon. The Psammead has lived a very, very long time. And he sold me to that man you bought me from, and then I bit them both. Now, what's your news? There's not quite so much biting in our story, said Cyril regretfully. In fact, there isn't any. Father's gone to Manchuria, and Mother and the lamb have gone to Madeira because Mother was ill, and don't I just wish that they were both safe home again? Merely from habit, the sand fairy began to blow itself out, but it stopped short suddenly. It blows itself out, it puffs itself up when it's concentrating to be able to grant a wish. I forgot, it said. I can't give you any more wishes. No, but look here, said Cyril, couldn't we call in old nurse and get her to say she wishes they were safe home? I'm sure she does. No go, said the Psammead. It's just the same as you're wishing yourself if you get someone else to wish for you. It won't act. But it did yesterday with the man in the shop, said Robert. Ah, yes, said the creature. But you didn't ask him to wish, and you didn't know what would happen if he did. That can't be done again. It's played out. Then you can't help us at all, said Jane. Oh, I did think you could do something. I've been thinking about it ever since we saved your life yesterday. I thought you'd be certain to be able to fetch Father back, even if you didn't manage Mother. And Jane began to cry. Now don't, said the Psammead hastily. You know how it always upsets me if you cry. I can't feel safe a moment. Look here, you must have some new kind of charm. So the reference to not feeling safe is because water is not healthy for the Psammead. You must have some new kind of charm. That's easier said than done, said one of the children. Not a bit of it, said the creature. There's one of the strongest charms in the world not a stone's throw from where you bought me yesterday. The man that I bit so, the first one I mean, went into a shop to ask how much something cost. I think he said it was a concertina, and while he was telling the man in the shop how much too much he wanted for it, I saw the charm in a sort of tray with a lot of other things. If you can only buy that, you'll be able to have your heart's desire. So it sounds like a second-hand bits and pieces shop, bric-a-brac, that he's talking about. If there's a tray with a whole lot of things in, they often have that at our op shop. The children looked at each other and then at the Psammead. Then Cyril coughed awkwardly and took sudden courage to say what everyone was thinking. I do hope you won't be waxy, he said, but it's like this. When you used to give us our wishes, they almost always got us into some row or other. We used to think you wouldn't have been pleased if they hadn't. Now, about this charm, we haven't got over and above too much tin, that's money, and if we blew it all on this charm and it turns out to not be up to much, well, you see what I'm driving at, don't you? Sorry, indigestion. I get it from time to time. I see that you don't see far more than the length of your nose, and that's not far, said the Psammead crossly. Look here, I had to give you the wishes, and of course they turned out badly in a sort of way, because you hadn't the sense to wish for what was good for you. But this charm's quite different. I haven't got to do this for you. It's just my own generous kindness that makes me tell you about it, so it's bound to be all right, see? Don't be cross, said Anthea. Please, please don't. You see, it's all we've got. We shan't have any more pocket money till Daddy comes home, unless he sends us some in a letter. But we do trust you, and I say all of you, she went on, don't you think it's worth spending all the money, if there's even the chanciest chance of getting father and mother back safe now? Just think of it. Oh, do let's. I don't think the children have stopped to think about the fact that the parents need to be where they are at the moment. They're just thinking about the fact that they are missing them. I don't care what you do, said the Psammead. I'll go back to sand again till you've made up your minds. No, don't, said everybody, and Jane added, we are quite mind made up. Don't you see we are? Let's get our hats. Will you come with us? Of course, said the Psammead. How else would you find the shop? So everybody got its hat. The Psammead was put into a flat bass bag or bass bag. I'm not sure which one. B-A-S-S, because it's pronounced both ways. It's like bow and bow. The bow on a boat and the bow on a girl's hair are both spelt the same way, B-O-W. Neither is incorrect in terms of pronunciation, so a bass bag, maybe it's for a particular type of fish, a bass, which is said bass, not bass, that came from Farringdon Market with that came from Farringdon Market with 2 pounds of filleted plaice in it. Plaice is a type of fish. Bass is a type of fish. So there you go. Now it contained about 3 pounds and a quarter of solid Psammead, and the children took it in turns to carry it. It's not half the weight of the lamb, said Robert, and the girls sighed. Sorry, I've got an itchy nose, and I need to stop it from itching, or I'm going to keep being distracted too much. Yeah, that's what happens when you itch your nose. It's not half the weight of the lamb, Robert said, and the girls sighed. The Psammead poked a wary eye out of the top of the basket every now and then and told the children which turnings to take. How on earth do you know? Asked Robert. I can't think how you do it. And the Psammead said sharply, No, I don't suppose you can. Think of how he does it. And at last they came to the shop. It had all sorts of things and kinds of things in the window. Concertinas, that's like, a concertina is, let me get you a picture, it's easier. A concertina is like a miniature version of an accordion. Seeing if I can find you a clear one. Save image as, and I'm just doing this because they keep referencing it. Otherwise I wouldn't bother. And no, I don't pre-read these stories, very obviously. Part of the reason I don't pre-read them is because... Why? Because... Oh yes, I did save it to the right place. Is because I'd rather have my reactions to the story being as they come. It does mean that sometimes I say things wrong or get the information wrong, but other times it just keeps it a bit fresher. And it means I don't get bored when I'm reading to you. So this is a concertina, this box they're usually hexagonal, which this one is. They're quite small, they just fit between 2 hands. And they've got buttons on each side. Usually with a concertina and an accordion, you've got treble buttons on one side and bass buttons on the other. And the bellows in the middle, that's this wriggly bit here, the wiggly bit there, are what provide the air to push through the metal reeds that are used to... Oh, hello, Squibble. Thank you for being here. We're being raided. That's my first time ever. Oh, my goodness. That's wonderful. Thanks for being here. And thank you all you raiders for coming too. I'm just in the middle of explaining what a concertina is. Actually, I'll put the picture back up. So a concertina is like a miniature accordion, button accordion. Oh yeah, sorry about that squibble. My moderator settings, my anti-spam settings, don't allow lots and lots and lots of capital letters. So that's the reason why your post didn't come through. Sorry about that. And thanks for following, jevvv. I'm thinking it's jevvv. It might be jevvv. I'm not sure. You can type it in if you'd like me to correct the pronunciation. So, I'm not quite sure how it says you rated with 9 viewers and then 7 viewers. Have you got 2 streams going at the same time? Intriguing. Anyway, so a concertina, that's this thing here. The wiggly bit in the middle means that when you open it up, air gets sucked into it, and then when you squeeze it together, the air gets pushed through whichever reeds the buttons are being pressed for. Now, the reeds in them, no problem, the reeds in them are like the reeds, the little wee thin metal strips that are used to make the sound in a mouth organ or a harmonica. It's the same sort of thing. And also in the old days when I was growing up, yeah, I'm that old, we used to have what we called a pedal organ or a treadle organ, and they also used reeds. So it's like a pipe organ, except instead of using pipes, it uses metal reeds, and the air is pushed through the reeds, and each reed has a set length, and so therefore that it makes a noise at a particular pitch, and it's by the combination of which buttons you push as to which sounds you get out of it, and that's how you play your tune. So yeah, concertina. And if you look at old movies with sailors on sailing ships, especially if there's pirates as well, more sort of kid-focused ones, but actually made as old ones, not modern ones made to look old. Often there'll be someone who's playing a concertina when they're wanting to have a bit of a play some sea shanties, or sing some sea shanties and that sort of stuff. Anyway, so that's what a concertina is, which is in the shop, and apparently it's the sort of shop where you get all sorts of random as second-hand things for sale. They do have them in different shapes. There are 8-sided ones and there are rectangular ones, but that's the common one is these hexagonal ones. We'll carry on with reading the story now. Apart from, I'm just getting over my excitement of having so many people visiting. It's wonderful. Thank you. Really appreciate the visit. So what we're doing is we're reading a book called The Story of the Amulet by Edith Nesbit. It was published in 1906. It's the third book in the trilogy. The first one is 5 Children and It, the It in the story being the sand fairy that they find, which is referred to as a Psammead, or the children refer to him as the Psammead. So that's 5 Children and It. The second book in the series is called The Phoenix and the Carpet. So it's another book which ends up with a whole lot of wishes involved with it. All 3 stories for the Psammead series involve wishes and the consequence of the things that people wish for. So we are going to carry on. This is only our second day reading from the story of the amulet, and we have yet to discover this amulet that is in the title of the book, but I'm pretty sure that this is where we find out what it is. So they've rediscovered the Psammead last time. They rescued him from this pet shop where the owner of the pet shop was a little bit harsh, and so the Psammead in self-defense had bitten him a number of times, and the chap had wished that the children would take the Psammead away, and so they were able to. That's how they rescued it. So here we go. They've finally found the shop where the Psammead has seen something that will help the children to have wishes. And I'm not quite sure why the Psammead has decided that it's so important for these children to keep getting wishes. The Psammead was actually kind of involved in the second book with the fact that they ended up with the carpet and the phoenix of the phoenix and the carpet. And the carpet was a wishing carpet. Anyway, we'll carry on. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe the Psammead's going to explain to us for some reason why it's insisting that these children get these wishes. Maybe thinks that it's time that they actually learnt that there are consequences to what you wish for. Even more important than previously, just because it's still happening. How random. Anyway, at last they came to the shop. It had all sorts and kinds of things in the window. Concertinas, the picture, and silk handkerchiefs, china vases and teacups, blue Japanese jars, pipes, swords, smoking pipes, swords, pistols, lace collars, silver spoons tied up in half dozens, and wedding rings in a red lacquered basin. All jumbled in together by the sound of it. There were officers' epaulettes and doctors' lancets. A lancet is like a scalpel, I think. You can look that one up. I don't need to look that one up for you. There were tea caddies inlaid with red turtle shell, what we would now refer to as tortoise shell. The pattern of colours that are in my glasses frames is inspired by turtle or tortoise shells. It was before the days of plastics. It was a source that they had was because turtles and tortoises were caught and they were used as the meat of them was used for food. Turtle soup, which is why there is mock turtle soup in Alice in Wonderland, another story we have over on YouTube in the playlists, which I should give you a link for, actually. I will. So tortoise shell and turtle shell were used for things like combs, combing your hair to get it neat and tidy before the days of plastic, for combs like this sort of, trying to get it where you can see it, like this style of comb. Because plastic is a man-made substance, they hadn't yet discovered how to make it. And so they used natural substances to make the sort of things that they wanted. And you could cut tortoise shell or turtle shell fairly finely into like the teeth of a comb and still be able to use it. Also for the ornamental combs that would, like a mantilla lace thing that the Spanish woman used to have at some stage, those apparently were either out of wood, very finely carved, or also out of tortoise shell. So that's the red turtle shell and brass there were tea caddies inlaid with red turtle shell and brass curly-whirlies, so patterns made out of brass. Plates of different kinds of money and stacks of different kinds of plates. There was a beautiful picture of a little girl washing a dog, which Jane liked very much, and in the middle of the window there was a dirty silver tray full of mother-of-pearl card counters, used for when you're playing cards, obviously. Old seals. I'm pretty sure that the seals they mean are the sort like for when you're sealing your letters with sealing wax, not the animals, because that would get stinky. Paste buckles. That's buckles made with, to look like they've got gems set in them, but they're not real gems. It's what they call paste, a cheap imitation jewel made out of paste. Snuff boxes and all sorts of little dingy odds and ends. Dingy's a good word, isn't it? The Psammead put its head quite out of the fish basket to look in the window when Cyril said, "There's a tray there with rubbish in it." And then its long snail's eyes saw something that made them stretch out so much that they were as long and thin as new slate pencils. The Psammead, for those who are new here and haven't heard any of these other stories, the Psammead is a sand fairy. Does not look anything like a fairy you or I know. Body is kind of rotund and furry, possibly a little bit like some sort of, I don't know, monkey or something else like that, that sort of family of things. And so you've got this body. It's got ears like big bats' ears. It's got long, grabby arms and with hands and feet like monkeys' hands and feet. I don't know that it's got a tail, I can't remember. And then on its head, instead of normal eyes like us or other animals where the eyes are on the side of the head, it's got eyes that are on stalks like snails' eyes. Can you imagine that? They're up on stalks, and so when it wants to have a look at something, it'll poke its snail's eyes out and it will stretch the stalk part out as far as it can to try and actually see what it's trying to get to. So yeah, it's just like, oh my goodness, that's a really weird creature. And kudos to the author for imagining something as odd and unusual. When you think fairy, you do not think this sort of style of thing. quite different. Anyway, so we'll carry on. So the Psammead has spotted the basket because Cyril spotted it and mentioned it. Its long snail's eyes saw something that made them stretch out so much that they were as long and thin as new slate pencils. Its fur bristled thickly, and made its fur stand out. And its voice was quite hoarse with excitement as it whispered, "That's it! That's it! There, under that blue and yellow buckle. You can see a bit sticking out. It's red. Do you see it?" "Is it that thing something like a horseshoe?" asked Cyril. "And red like the common sealing wax you do up parcels with?" "Yes, that's it," said the Psammead. "Now you do just as you did before. Ask the price of other things. That blue buckle would do. Then the man will get the tray out of the window. I think you'd better be the one," it said to Anthea. "We'll wait out here." So the others flattened their noses against the shop window. So it's got a particular tactic for them being able to get it either very cheaply or maybe even for free. So we really, really need to have a listen to this, just out of interest. So the others flattened their noses against the shop window, and presently a large, dirty, short-fingered hand with a very big diamond ring came stretching through the green half-curtains at the back of the shop window and took away the tray. They could not see what was happening in the interview between Anthea and the diamond ring, nickname for the shopkeeper, and it seemed to them that she had time, if she had the money, to buy everything in the shop before the moment came when she stood before them, her face wreathed in grins, as Cyril said later, and in her hand the charm. It was something like this. Now let's see if I actually did find you that picture. No, I didn't, because we've changed pictures so I could show you the concertina. Here you go. Here is what the amulet looks like. It's almost like a figure of like a person. That will be the bit that they saw in poking out from underneath the blue, whatever it was in the tray. That would be the horseshoe shape there that they saw poking out. So that's a hole through the middle. Right. I'll leave that there in the background for a minute. And it was made of a red, smooth, softly shiny stone. "I've got it," Anthea whispered, just opening her hand to give the others a glimpse of it. So it can't be very big because she's a child and it fits in her hand. "Do let's get home. We can't stand here like stuck pigs looking in at the window." Yes, it is. I think of it as, when I see this, that it's a stylized or a variation on an ankh, which is that Egyptian symbol which looks like a cross with a loop at the top. Right, I'll just get... You can carry on looking at it if you want, otherwise I can put it out of the way. And yeah, there's someone downstairs doing a smoothie. Right. "Do let's get home. We can't stand here like stuck pigs looking at it in the street." Might call attention to something they shouldn't be calling attention to. We don't know. So home they went. The parlour in Fitzroy Street was a very flat background to magic happenings. So Fitzroy Street, I was telling those who were here right at the beginning, this picture behind us was published about 6 years after the book was published, and this is Fitzroy Street, the Fitzroy Street that's mentioned in the book as being where the children are staying. The children really, really, really wanted to go and stay in the country again like they had the previous summer, which is the one where they had found the Psammead in the sand pit, which is where people used to dig to get sand for using, and the Psammead, they'd had these wonderful adventures, although they were sort of like a bit awkward too, because the Psammead was granting them wishes. They could have 3 wishes a day, I think it was. Anyway, we'll carry on. But yeah, that's Fitzroy Street behind us. We'll carry on with reading the actual story. The parlour in Fitzroy Street was a very flat background to magic happenings. Down in the country among the flowers and green fields, anything had seemed, and indeed had been, possible. But it was hard to believe that anything really wonderful could happen so near the Tottenham Court Road, another real street in London. But the Psammead was there, and in itself was wonderful. And it could talk, and it had shown them where a charm could be bought that would make the owner of it perfectly happy. So the 4 children hurried home, taking very long steps with their chins stuck out and their mouths shut very tight indeed. They went so fast that the Psammead was quite shaken about in its fish bag, but it did not say anything, perhaps for fear of attracting public notice. Yes, it would have been rather noticeable having a bag from which was coming a voice. They got home at last very hot indeed, and set the Psammead on the green tablecloth. "Now then," said Cyril. But the Psammead had to have a plate of sand fetched for it was quite faint. When it had refreshed itself a little, it said, "Now then, let me see the charm." I'm just going to check to see if we have a picture that is going to be used here. We do. I will show it to you when we get to the part of the story that the caption on it is for. It doesn't show you the caption, but I see the caption. It helps me to know whereabouts in the story that the picture is associated with, because as I said at the beginning, my copy of the book doesn't have all the illustrations because it's taken from a different edition. "Now then, let me see the charm," and Anthea laid it on the green table cover. The Psammead shot out his long eyes to look at it, then turned them reproachfully on Anthea and said, "But there's only half of it here." Picture. So there's the Psammead. See what I mean by like a monkey-like body with these like antenna, but that's where its eyes are on the end there. And here are the 4 children around the table. So that is Cyril and Anthea and Jane and Robert. And that is the amulet. So he's sitting on a plate with sand on it, just to help him to calm and refresh and feel a lot better. "But there's only half of it here," it said. This was indeed a blow. "It was all there was," said Anthea, with timid firmness. She knew it was not her fault. "There should be another piece," said the Psammead, "and a sort of pin to fasten the 2 together." "Isn't half any good?" "Won't it work without the other half?" "It costs 7 and 6. "Oh, bother, bother, bother," all the comments coming from around the table. "Don't be silly little idiots," said everyone, and the Psammead, all together. Then there was a wretched silence. Cyril broke it. "What shall we do?" "Go back to the shop and see if they haven't got the other half," said the Psammead. "I'll go to sand till you come back. Cheer up. Even the bit you've gotten is some good, but it'll be no end of a bother if you can't find the other." That's interesting. I wonder what would happen if they ended up wishing with it and didn't have the other half. It sounds like it's meant to have 2 halves, not that it's been broken, because it talked about this pin to hold the 2 halves together. So Cyril went to the shop and the Psammead to sand, and the other 3 went to dinner, which was now ready. And old Nurse was very cross that Cyril was not ready too. The 3 were sitting at the windows when Cyril returned, and even before he was near enough for them to see his face, there was something about the slouch of his shoulders and set of his knickerbockers. That's those long shorts which are usually tucked in around just under the knee, that were fashionable in the Edwardian period, which I'm not going to look up for you, but you can. Not this time, because we've done a lot of that sort of thing already. And the set of his knickerbockers and the way he dragged his boots along, that showed but too plainly that his errand had been in vain. "Well," they all said, hoping against hope, on the front doorstep. No go, Cyril answered. The man said the thing was perfect. He said it was a Roman lady's locket, and people shouldn't buy curios if they didn't know anything about something or other. Archaeology, I think. And that he never went back on a bargain because it wasn't business, and he expected his customers to act the same. He was simply nasty. That's what he was, and I want my dinner. It was plain that Cyril was not pleased. The unlikeliness of anything really interesting happening in that parlour lay like a weight of lead on everyone's spirits. Cyril had his dinner, and just as he was swallowing the last mouthful of apple pudding, there was a scratch at the door. Anthea opened it, and in walked the Psammead. Well, it said, when it had heard the news, things might be worse, only you won't be surprised if you have a few adventures before you get the other half. You want to get it, of course. Rather, was the general reply, and we don't mind adventures. No, said the Psammead, I seem to remember that about you. Well, sit down here and listen with all your ears. 8 are there? Right, I am glad you know arithmetic. Now pay attention, because I don't intend to tell you everything twice over. As the children settled themselves on the floor, it was far more comfortable than the chairs, as well as more polite to the Psammead, who was stroking its whiskers on the hearthrug. A sudden cold pain caught at Anthea's heart. Father, mother, the darling lamb, all far away. Then a warm, comfortable feeling flowed through her. The Psammead was here, and at least half a charm, and there were to be adventures. If you don't know what a cold pain is, I'm glad for your sakes, and I hope you never may. Now, said the Psammead cheerfully, you are not particularly nice, nor particularly clever, and you're not at all good-looking. Still, you've saved my life. Oh, when I think of that man and his pail of water. So I'll tell you all I know. At least, of course, I can't do that because I know far too much. But I'll tell you all I know about this red thing. Do, said everyone. Well then, said the Psammead, this thing is half of an amulet that can do all sorts of things. It can make the corn grow, and the waters flow, and the trees bear fruit, and the little new beautiful babies come. Not that babies are beautiful, of course, it broke off to say, but their mothers think they are, and as long as you think a thing is true, it is true as far as you're concerned. Robert yawned. I wonder if that point is something they need to remember. Robert yawned. The Psammead went on. The complete amulet can keep off all the things that make people unhappy. Jealousy, bad temper, pride, disagreeableness, greediness, selfishness, laziness, evil spirits, people called them when the amulet was made. Don't you think it would be nice to have it? Very, said the children, quite without enthusiasm, and it can give you strength and courage. That's better, said Cyril. And virtue. I suppose it's nice to have that, said Jane, but not with much interest. And it can give you your heart's desire. Now you're talking, said Robert. Of course I am, retorted the Psammead tartly. So there's no need for you to. Heart's desire is good enough for me, said Cyril. Yes, but, Anthea ventured, all that's what the whole charm can do. There's something that the half we've got can win off its own bat, isn't there? She appealed to the Psammead. It nodded. Yes, it said, the half has the power to take you anywhere you like to look for the other half. Ooh, that's intriguing, and that says to me adventure, going places. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Excuse me. The half has the power to take you anywhere you like to look for the other half. This seemed a brilliant prospect, till Robert asked, Does it know where to look? The Psammead shook its head and answered, I don't think it's likely. Do you? No, said the Psammead. Then, said Robert, we might as well look for a needle in a bottle of hay. Yes, it is bottle and not bundle. Father said so. Not at all, said Psammead briskly. You think you know everything, but you are quite mistaken. The first thing is to get the thing to talk. An amulet? Talk? Can it? Jane's question did not mean that she thought it couldn't, for in spite of the parlour furniture, the feeling of magic was growing deeper and thicker, and seemed to fill the room like a dream of a scented fog. Of course it can. I suppose you can read, said the Psammead. Oh, yes. Everyone was rather hurt at the question. Well, then all you've got to do is read the name that's written on the part of the charm that you've got, and as soon as you say the name out loud, the thing will have power to do, well, several things. There was a silence. The red charm was passed from hand to hand. Sorry, I'm just in the middle of looking for the next picture because it's actually important to the next part of the story and getting it to a size where you'll be able to see it. Sorry. And then I'll keep on reading. There was a silence. The red charm was passed from hand to hand. There's no name on it, said Cyril at last. Nonsense, said the Psammead. What's that? Oh, that, said Cyril. It's not reading. It looks like pictures of chickens and snakes and things. This was on the charm. There you go. What was Goriki saying before about it looking a little bit like not like a typical ankh, but kind of? This looks a little bit to me like handwritten hieroglyphics. What do you think? That could well be it. Don't think the children know how to read Egyptian hieroglyphics. Oh dear. I've no patience with you, said the Psammead. If you can't read, you must find someone who can. A priest now. So obviously he expects them to be able to read this. I've read that bit, sorry. We don't know any priests, said Anthea. We know a clergyman. He's called a priest in the prayer book, you know, but he only knows Greek and Latin and Hebrew, and this isn't any of those. I know that. The Psammead stamped a furry foot angrily. I wish I'd never seen you, it said. You aren't any more good than so many stone images. It kind of sounds like the Psammead actually has an ulterior motive with helping the children to find this that will grant wishes, among other things. Every now and then he says something, or it says something that makes me think that there's a little bit more going on with the willingness to find them something that will grant wishes. Do you think so? Anyway, carry on. I wish I'd never seen you, it said. You aren't any more good than so many stone images. Not so much, if I'm to tell the truth. Is there no wise man in your Babylon who can pronounce the names of the great ones? There's a poor learned gentleman upstairs, said Anthea. We might try him. He has a lot of stone images in his room, and iron-looking ones too. We peeped in once when he was out. So, old nurse, I think she may actually own the house, but rent out some rooms in it. The way the story talked about it being her house. Anyway. Old nurse says he doesn't eat enough to keep a canary alive. He spends it all on stones and things. Try him, said the Psammead, only be careful. If he knows a greater name than this and uses it against you, your charm will be of no use. Bind him first with the chains of honour and upright dealing, and then ask his aid. Oh yes, you'd better all go. You can put me to sand as you go upstairs. I must have a few minutes' peace and quietness. So the 4 children hastily washed their hands and brushed their hair, this was Anthea's idea, and went up to knock at the door of the poor learned gentleman, and to bind him with the chains of honour and upright dealing. Oh my goodness! That's actually the end of that chapter. Are we going to read the next one? It's only 24 pages, and the previous one I think was quite a bit more than that. And if I don't interrupt myself quite so much, we'll get there a little bit sooner. I normally only stream for about an hour and a half, but let's give it some more time. Let's get into the story. Okay, so we're reading The Story of the Amulet by Edith Nesbit, and this is chapter 3, The Past. The learned gentleman had let his dinner get quite cold. It was mutton chop, and as it lay on the plate, it looked like a brown island in the middle of a frozen pond. And because the grease of the gravy had become cold and consequently white. Obviously, she doesn't make gravy the way I do if the fat is separated up onto the top of it. It looked very nasty, and it was the first thing the children saw. After knocking 3 times and receiving no reply, one of them ventured to turn the handle and softly open the door. The chop was on the end of a long table that ran down one side of the room. The table had images on it and queer-shaped stones and books, and there were glass cases fixed against the wall behind with little strange things in them. The cases were rather like the ones you see in jewelers' shops. For holding things safely. Just seeing if one of my commands works. Yes, it does. Yay! The poor learned gentleman was sitting at a table in the window, looking at something very small, which he held in a pair of fine pincers. That's like tweezers. He had a round spyglass sort of thing in one eye, which reminded the children of watchmakers, and also of the long snail's eyes of the Psammead, because it's poking out from his head. Sorry, I'm just trying to type at the same time. So for those of you who are here before the raid, I've just put in Squibble's link as well as GoReki's. Now, GoReki is part of Codex, and Squibble does artwork online. Wonderful, both of them. So there you go. Check them out and give them a follow and support them in whatever way you can. I love having people around who do stuff which I'm quite happy to share that isn't specifically shooting games. I've got friends who do those as well, and that's great. But if you want to have just gentle sort of story type things going on, then sometimes you don't really want the shooting games, hence me giving you the shout out for those two. Right, carrying on reading. He had the spyglass sort of thing in his eye, which is like what watchmakers and jewelers use, reminded the children of the snail's eyes, the snail-style eyes of the Psammead. The gentleman was very long and thin, and his long, thin boots stuck out under the other side of his table, so he's quite tall. He did not hear the door open, and the children stood hesitating. At last Robert gave the door a push, and they all started back, for in the middle of the wall that the door had hidden was a mummy case, very, very, very big, painted in red and yellow and green and black, and the face of it seemed to look at them quite angrily. Sorry, trying to see this over here. Yes, this is meant to have already been set up. It kind of was. Yeah, I thought so. Just checking on because the captions are on in my files. So there's the mummy case. It's quite big, as you see. Children have just come in and they've been a bit startled. That's the knickerbockers I was talking about. See how he's got kind of like a cross between shorts and trousers? Those are knickerbockers. And then he's got what they called stockings. So we would nowadays call them socks, but they come up and the top of them is covered by his pants. And the clothing that they're wearing and the sort of hairstyles they've got, very Edwardian, particular part of Edwardian era. Right, so there's the mummy case. So I'm guessing that this chap is either an amateur or a professional archaeologist, or Egyptologist is probably what he is, someone who studies the archaeology and history of Egypt. Let's carry on. The mummy seemed to look at them quite angrily. You know what a mummy case is like, of course. If you don't, you'd better go to the British Museum at once and find out. I've been there, actually. It's really interesting. They've got a whole room that's full of things like mummy cases, and some of the cases are propped open and you can see the mummy inside it. They've got things like canoptic urns, which are the ones that they used to put people's organs in. Yes, I know that sounds all gross, but this is just the way the Egyptians used to do stuff. When they were dealing with highly honoured people who had died, they would separate out the different parts of the body because of their beliefs about what happened to a person once they had died. It's quite a fascinating study, actually. understanding the way people of different cultures do things because of their beliefs. It's, yeah, like I say, quite fascinating. It also affects their architecture, surprisingly, but when you actually start to study it, not so surprisingly. Right, where do we get to? Go to the British Museum at once and find out. That's what the author's saying, which is actually just down the road from where they're living at the moment. Anyway, it's not at all the sort of thing you expect to meet in a top floor front room in Bloomsbury, which is apparently what the district is called at the time, looking as though it would like to know what business you had there. So everyone said, "Oh," rather loud, and their boots clattered as they stumbled back. The learned gentleman took the glass out of his eye, the looking glass, and said, "I beg your pardon," in very soft, quiet, pleasant voice, the voice of a gentleman who had been to Oxford University. Not the city, but the actual university. "It's us that beg yours," said Cyril politely. "We are sorry to disturb you." "Come in," said the gentleman, rising with the most distinguished courtesy. Anthea told herself, "I'm delighted to see you. Won't you sit down?" "No, not there. Allow me to move that papyrus." He cleared a chair and stood smiling and looking kindly through his large round spectacles. "He treats us like grown-ups," whispered Robert, "and he doesn't seem to know how many of us there are." "Hush," said Anthea. "It isn't bad manners to whisper." I'm not quite sure. You say, Cyril. You go ahead. Oh, she's meaning in this context because they're trying to communicate with each other. It's actually okay to whisper because normally it would be considered rude. I think that's what that's about. "We're very sorry to disturb you," said Cyril politely, "but we did knock 3 times and you didn't say come in or run away now, or that you couldn't be bothered just now, or to come when you weren't so busy, or any of the things people do say when you knock at doors. So we opened it. We knew you were in because we heard you sneeze while we were waiting." "Not at all," said the gentleman. "Do sit down." "He has found out there are 4 of us," said Robert, as the gentleman cleared 3 more chairs. He put the things off them carefully on the floor. The first chair had things like bricks that tiny, tiny birds' feet have walked over when the bricks were soft, only the marks were in regular lines. Ooh, do you know what that is? That's cuneiform. I think it's pronounced cuneiform. It's a type of writing that's made with indentations that look like long little triangles arranged together. Cuneiform or cuneiform? I think I've heard it both ways. Looks like little birds have walked over it. That makes a lot of sense. The second chair had round things on it, like very large, fat, long, pale beads. Not sure about that one. And the last chair had a pile of dusty papers on it. The children sat down. "We know you are very, very learned," said Cyril, "and we have got a charm and we want you to read the name on it because it isn't in Latin or Greek or Hebrew or any of the languages we know." "A thorough knowledge of even those languages is a very fair foundation on which to build an education," said the gentleman politely. "Oh," said Cyril, blushing, "but we only know them to look at, except Latin, and I'm only in Caesar with that." The stage of learning, they used to focus on different people and their writings, and Caesar had actually done a few writings, and so therefore, because they were probably a little bit more concise, they were at the early stages of boys learning Latin at school. The gentleman took off his spectacles and laughed. His laugh sounded rusty, Cyril thought, as though it wasn't often used. "Of course," he said, "I'm sure I beg your pardon. I think I must have been in a dream. You are the children who live downstairs, are you not? Yes, I have seen you as I passed in and out. And you have found something that you think to be an antiquity, and you've brought it to show me. That was very kind. I should like to inspect it." "I'm afraid we didn't think about your liking to inspect it," said the truthful Anthea. "It was just for us, because we wanted to know the name on it." Oh, yes, and I say, Robert interjected, you won't think it rude of us if we ask you first, before we show it, to be bound in the what-do-you-call-it of it. In the bounds of honour and upright dealing, said Anthea. I'm afraid I don't quite follow, said the gentleman with gentle nervousness. Well, it's this way, said Cyril. We've got part of a charm, and the Sammy, something, told us it would work, though it's only half a one, but it won't work unless we say the name that's on it. But of course, if you've got another name that can lick ours, our charm would be a no-go. I think he's telling him too much. So we want you to give us your word of honour as a gentleman, though I'm sure now I've seen you that it's not necessary, but still, I've promised to ask you, so we must. Will you please give us your honourable word not to say any name stronger than the name on our charm? The gentleman had put on his spectacles again and was looking at Cyril through them. He now said, "Bless me," more than once, adding, "Who told you all this?" "I can't tell you," said Cyril. "I'm very sorry, but I can't." Some faint memory of a far-off childhood must have come to the learned gentleman just then, for he smiled. "I see," he said. "It is some sort of game that you are engaged in?" "Of course, yes." "Well, I will certainly promise. Yet I wonder how you heard of the names of power." "We can't tell you that either," said Cyril. And Anthea said, "Here's our charm," and held it out. With politeness, but without interest, the gentleman took it. But after the first glance, all his body suddenly stiffened, as a pointer does when he sees a partridge. A pointer is a type of dog, hunting dog. And it will lean forward and point its nose, and its whole body will be apart from its legs, will be in a straight line. So its nose is pointing at the bird that it's found, and then it's a straight line along its back, and its tail will be poking out the other way. So the whole of the dog is pointing at the bird that it's found. That stiffness of pointing at something, that's what they're talking about here. And it was common, and so therefore it's kind of a shorthand way of explaining something in a story from this era. After the first glance, all his body suddenly stiffened, as a pointer's does when he sees a partridge. "Excuse me," he said in a quite changed voice, and carried the charm to the window. He looked at it. He turned it over. He fixed his spyglass in his eye and looked again. No one said anything. Only Robert made a shuffling noise with his feet till Anthea nudged him to shut up. At last the learned gentleman drew a long breath. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "We didn't find it. We bought it at a shop. Jacob Absalom, the name is, not far from Charing Cross," said Cyril. "We gave 7 and 6pence for it," added Jane. She's the youngest. "It is not for sale, I suppose. You do not wish to part with it. I ought to tell you that it is extremely valuable. Extraordinarily valuable, I may say." "Yes," said Cyril, "we know that, so of course we want to keep it." "Keep it carefully, then," said the gentleman impressively. "And if ever you should wish to part with it, may I ask you give me the refusal of it?" "The refusal?" "I mean, do not sell it to anyone else until you have given me the opportunity of buying it." "All right," said Cyril, "we won't." "But we don't want to sell it. We want to make it do things." "I suppose you can play at that as well as anything else," said the gentleman. "But I'm afraid the days of magic are over." "They aren't really," said Anthea earnestly. "You don't see they aren't. You'd see that they aren't if I could tell you about our last summer holidays, only I mustn't." "Thank you very much. And can you read the name?" "I think she's probably said a bit more than she should have." "Yes, I can read it." "Will you tell it to us?" "The name," said the gentleman, "is Hekau Setche. Is Hekau Setche. I'm just going to type this in and see if I come up with a pronunciation. Sorry, because I'm thinking I may have to use this one again. And one day I will have my microphone not on my desk. And therefore you're not going to get the big loud thumpy noises that come from it. Apparently it's a genuine ancient Egyptian name, and those hieroglyphics we saw actually are authentic. Let's see if it'll give us a pronunciation. Nope, none at all. So I'm having to make it up. And you will probably say it differently. I'm going to write it into the chat box so you can see how it's written. And you can say it however you like. I'm going to probably end up changing the way I say it just because I'm not very good at remembering to keep saying something a certain way. So, hekau secha. Hekau secha, repeated Cyril. Thanks awfully. I do hope we haven't taken too much of your time. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. So Squibble has just written, looks about right. Ancient Egyptian has no vowels. So technically it would kind of be our interpretation of something written in ancient Egyptian would be kind of up to how we decide to join together the consonants and the sounds by the sound of it. Anyway, thanks awfully. I do hope we haven't taken up too much of your time. No written vowels, yeah. They would have said vowels but not actually had them written. It's a little bit like in Hebrew, the name for the top name for God is what we pronounce as Yahweh, which has vowels in it. But it was written YW something H, which that's the transliteration of the sounds. But so when they write it using the letters that we use, it has no formal vowels in it because the Y at the beginning is in consonant form. Anyway, carrying on. Yeah, because it was a name that was not to be taken lightly, and so therefore the vowels were not included. So it's like it's not being said, even though it's written. Right. Yeah, and that's probably a little bit like how it is with Egyptian in terms of no written vowels. Kind of. They were influential on each other. Well, Egyptian, I think, was influential on Hebrew for that sort of thing, for importance on things. Right. They said thank you in all the different polite ways they could think of and filed out of the door and down the stairs. Anthea was last. Halfway down to the first landing, she turned and ran up again. The door was still open, and the learned gentleman and the mummy case were standing opposite each other, and both looked as though they had stood like that for years. The gentleman started when Anthea put her hand on his arm. I hope you won't be cross and say it's not my business, she said, but do look at your chop. Don't you think you ought to eat it? Father forgets his dinner sometimes when he's writing, and Mother always says I ought to remind him if she's not at home to do it herself, because it's so bad to miss your regular meals. So I thought perhaps you wouldn't mind my reminding you, because you don't seem to have anyone else to do it. She glanced at the mummy case. It certainly didn't look as though it would ever think to remind people of their meals. The learned gentleman looked at her for a moment before he said, Thank you, my dear. It was a kindly thought. No, I haven't anyone to remind me about things like that. He sighed and looked at the chop. It's not really appealing these days. It looks very nasty, said Anthea. Yes, he said, it does. I'll eat it immediately before I forget. As he ate it, he sighed more than once, perhaps because the chop was nasty, perhaps because he longed for the charm which the children did not want to sell. Perhaps because it was so long since anyone cared whether he ate his chops or forgot them. Chops, lamb chops, type of meat, cut of meat. There you go. For those who've forgotten that bit. Anthea caught the others at the stair foot. They woke the Psammead, and it taught them exactly how to use the word of power. And to make the charm speak. I am not going to tell you how this is done, because you might try to do it. And for you, any such trying would be almost sure to end in disappointment, because, in the first place, it is 1,000,000,000 to 1 against you ever getting hold of the right sort of charm. And if you did, there would be hardly any chance at all of you finding a learned gentleman clever enough and kind enough to read the word for you. So the pronunciation is probably important. The children and the Psammead crouched in a circle on the floor in the girls' bedroom, because in the parlour they might have been interrupted by old nurse coming in to lay the cloth for tea, lay the tea table for dinner, and the charm was put in the middle of the circle. Just checking out pictures just in case. Oh, actually, yes, we do actually have a picture of the tall gentleman looking at the charm. Here you go. Yes, rather skinny and looks like the sort of chap who often doesn't eat, but also thinks very hard about what he's studying, and therefore ends up with a rather worried look, even if he's not actually worried. Sorry, I forgot to check that. Okay, no, the next one is not right here. That's okay. But we'll get it ready, just in case. They didn't want to have nurse busting in on them while they were dealing with this charm, so the charm was put in the middle of the circle. The sun shone splendidly outside, and the room was very light. Through the open window came the hum and rattle of London, and in the street below they could hear the voice of the milkman. The milkman goes around with cream cans and milk cans and dishes them out to people as they need them. It has a regular run, and you have an order with him, and he comes to your house, and you come out with your containers that you want the milk put in, and then he puts it in for you, and you pay for it. That's before the days of being able to go down the road and buy it in a bottle or a carton or whatever else container that you use. Up north in New Zealand, they use plastic bags, or they did. Anyway, when all was ready, the Psammead signed to Anthea to say the word, and she said it. Instantly the whole light of all the world seemed to go out. The room was dark. The world outside was dark, darker than the darkest night that ever was, and all the sounds went out too, so that there was a silence deeper than any silence you have ever imagined or dreamed of imagining. It was like being suddenly deaf and blind, only darker and even quieter than that. But before the children had got over the sudden shock of it being enough to be frightened, a faint, beautiful light began to show in the middle of the circle, and at the same moment a faint, beautiful voice began to speak. The light was too small for anyone to see anything by, and the voice was too small for you to hear what it said. You could just see the light and just hear the voice. But the light grew stronger. It was greeny, like glowworms' lamps, which I have to take exception with, because all the glowworms I've ever seen, their light is bluey, not greeny, sort of like a very, very pale cyan type of blue colour. I would not call that green, but that's okay. She's obviously had a different range of experience to what I have with glowworms, unless what she calls glowworms are not the same as what I call glowworms. So we'll see. It was greeny like glowworms' lamps, and it grew and grew till it was as though thousands and thousands of glowworms were signalling to their winged sweethearts from the middle of the circle. And the voice grew, not so much in loudness as in sweetness, though it grew louder too, till it was so sweet that you wanted to cry with pleasure just at the sound of it. It was like nightingales, and the sea, and the fiddle, and the voice of your mother when you have been away a long time, and she meets you at the door when you get home, and the voice said, "Speak, what is it that you would hear?" I cannot tell you what language the voice used. I only know that everyone present understood it perfectly. If you come to think of it, there must be some language that everyone could understand if we only knew what it was. Nor can I tell you how the charm spoke, nor whether it was the charm that spoke, or some presence in the charm. The children could not have told you either. Indeed, they could not look at the charm while it was speaking, because the light was too bright. They looked instead at the green radiance on the faded Kidderminster carpet at the edge of the circle. Kidderminster's a place in England that's famous for having a carpet manufactory. They may have had several of them. Often places like that are famous for something have a whole lot of businesses there that do the same thing. So that's a reference to the Kidderminster carpet. It's probably also a certain style. They looked instead at the green radiance on the faded Kidderminster carpet at the edge of the circle. They all felt very quiet and not inclined to ask questions or fidget with their feet. For this was not like the things that had happened in the country when the Psammead had given them their wishes. That had been funny somehow, and this was not. It was something like Arabian Nights magic and something like being in church. No one cared to speak. It was Cyril who said at last, "Please, we want to know where the other half of the charm is." "The part of the amulet which is lost," said the beautiful voice, "was broken and ground into the dust of the shrine that held it. It and the pin that joined the two halves are themselves dust, and the dust is scattered over many lands and sunk in many seas." "Oh, I say," murmured Robert, and a blank silence fell. "Then it's all up," said Cyril at last. "It's no use our looking for a thing that's smashed into dust and the dust scattered all over the place." "If you would find it," said the voice, "you must seek it where it still is, perfect as ever." "I don't understand," said Cyril. "In the past you may find it," said the voice. "I wish we may find it," said Cyril. The Psammead whispered crossly, "Don't you understand? The thing existed in the past. If you were in the past too, you could find it. It's very difficult to make you understand things. Time and space are only forms of thought." "I see," said Cyril. "No, you don't," said the Psammead, "and it doesn't matter if you don't either. What I mean is that if you were only made the right way, you could see everything happening in the same place at the same time. Now do you see?" "I'm afraid I don't," said Anthea. "I'm sorry, I'm so stupid." "Well, at any rate, you see this. That lost half of the amulet is in the past. Therefore it is in the past we must look for it. I mustn't speak to the charm myself. Ask it things. Find out." I wonder if he's got some experience with it, or if it's because they're both things that grant wishes. How odd. "Where can we find the other part of you?" asked Cyril obediently. "In the past," said the voice. "What part of the past?" "I may not tell you. If you will choose a time, I will take you to the place that held it. You yourselves must find it." "When did you see it last?" asked Anthea. "I mean, when was it taken away from you?" The beautiful voice answered, "That was thousands of years ago. The amulet was perfect then, and lay in a shrine, the last of many shrines, and I worked wonders. Then came strange men with strange weapons and destroyed my shrine, and the amulet they bore away with many captives. But of these one, my priest, knew the word of power and spoke it for me, so that the amulet became invisible and thus returned to my shrine. But the shrine was broken down, and ere any magic could rebuild it, one spoke a word before which my power bowed down and was still, and the amulet lay there, still perfect, but enslaved. Then one, coming with stones to rebuild the shrine, dropped a hewn stone on the amulet as it lay, and one half was sundered from the other. I had no power to seek for that which was lost, and there being none to speak the word of power, I could not rejoin it. So the amulet lay in the dust of the desert many thousand years, and at last came a small man, a conqueror, with an army, and after him a crowd of men who sought to seem wise. And one of these found half the amulet, and brought it to this land, but none could read the name. So I lay still, and this man dying, and his son after him, the amulet was sold by those who came after, to a merchant, and from him you bought it, and it is here and now, the name of power having been spoken, I also am here. This is what the voice said. I think it must have meant Napoleon by the small man, the conqueror, because I know I have been told that he took an army to Egypt, and that afterwards a lot of wise people went grubbing about in the sand and fished up all sorts of wonderful things, older than you would think possible, and of these I believe this charm to have been one, and the most wonderful one of all. Everyone listened, and everyone tried to think. It is not easy to do this clearly when you have been listening to the kind of talk I have told you about. At last Robert said, "Can you take us to into the past, to the shrine where you and the other thing were together? If you could take us there, we might find the other parts still there after all these thousands of years." "Still there? Silly," said Cyril. "Don't you see if we go back into the past it won't be thousands of years ago, it will be now for us, won't it?" He appealed to the Psammead, who said, "You're not so far off the idea as you usually are." "Well," said Anthea, "will you take us back to when there was a shrine and you were safe in it, all of you?" "Yes," said the voice, "you must hold me up and speak the word of power, and one by one, beginning with the firstborn, you shall pass through me into the past, but let the last that passes be the one that holds me, and let him not lose his hold, lest you lose me and so remain in the past forever." "Oh, this is intriguing." "That's a nasty idea," said Robert. "When you desire to return," the beautiful voice went on, "hold me up towards the east and speak the word. Then passing through me you shall return to this time, and it shall be the present to you." "But how—" A bell rang loudly. "Oh, crikey!" exclaimed Robert. "That's tea. Will you please make it proper daylight again so that we can go down? And thank you so much for all your kindness." "We've enjoyed ourselves very much indeed, thank you," added Anthea politely. The beautiful light faded slowly. The great darkness and silence came, and these suddenly changed to the dazzlement of day and the great soft rustling sound of London, that is like some vast beast turning over in its sleep. The children rubbed their eyes, the Psammead ran quickly to its sandy bath, and the others went down to tea, and until the cups were actually filled, tea seemed less real than the beautiful voice and the greeny light. After tea, Anthea persuaded the others to allow her to hang the charm round her neck with a piece of string. "It would be so awful if it got lost," she said. "It might get lost anywhere, you know, and it would be rather beastly for us to have to stay in the past for ever and ever, wouldn't it?" And that's the end of chapter 3 and the end of today's reading. So there you go. We've finally met the amulet. Well, met as in, yes, in this context. But normally I say met to mean it's finally come up in the story. Sorry, I've got a little bit of indigestion at the moment. So we're going to find out if any of the Codex folk are currently online that you can go. I could raid them. I've got to see what they're actually streaming, if that's the case. Okay, no, that one isn't. I'm going to get better at this. I will eventually actually know what I'm doing, kind of. In the meantime, I'm going to say, if you are actually wanting to go and listen to some more public domain reading, then please look at my link below or join the Discord server. You don't have to be a reader yourself, as in reading public domain on stream. But you can join the Discord server. We discuss what we're going to be reading. We actually have a book club, and I think there's an online discussion once a month. There will be a discussion of in the Discord server what the current book is going to be, so people have enough time to actually read the book for themselves and then discuss it online and with other members of Codex. And it's not just for Codex members to actually be able to discuss it together. You can actually be part of the chat even if you're not actually streaming it, so it's not a problem. I'm not actually going to go and raid anybody at the moment, sorry, just because I haven't got myself set up for doing that, and I'm not very good at that sort of thing. But do have a look at the different members of Codex who are in my link below, my panels below my name, and go and have a listen to what they do. And if none of them are online, then have a look at some of their past streams and find out what else they have been doing. Not everybody only does reading streams. At the moment, that's all I actually do. I know that one of our members, Soft Spoken, is trying to get to affiliate status. So it would be really cool if you would go over and visit his Twitch channel. And I'm just going to give you his link. There you go. It's in the chat. And follow him. He reads as well. He does play games as well, but he, as far as I can see, he mainly does reading. Follow him, please do. Help him to get to the stage where he actually has enough people following him that he can actually share emotes with you and things like that. That's quite cool. But yeah, as I'm in a completely different time zone to where most of our streamers are. A lot of them are in North America. There's others. There's one of them's in Japan. There's at least one other that's in, I think, in England. I'm not sure. Europe somewhere anyway. And it just means that, yeah, I can't see anyone who's actually currently online. Just wondering why that's looking like that. Not quite what I was expecting it to look like. You can actually discover other people who read books out loud. You can find out what sort of things are going on. You can join the community, be part of it. The link that I gave you just before is for our Discord server. Be part of it. That's a wonderful way of actually being able to find others who read stories out loud, public domain stories out loud. And then if you're doing something like drawing or housework or maths homework, but in such a way that words are okay even while you're doing formulas and stuff like that, because I know some people are like that, then you've got something that can keep your mind occupied while you're actually doing your other things. I've got friends who often will actually just sit and stream and listen to me reading a story while they're actually at work, because the sort of work they do, they can have headphones on or earbuds in and be listening while they're actually still doing the rest of their job, which is more something that requires them working with their hands. So all of those things. Go and visit some others. Go and find out what they like. Follow them. If you're Amazon Prime member and you haven't yet used your free sub, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can actually subscribe to somebody on Twitch for free. One per month, I think it is. Do that. Find somebody and subscribe to them. If you want to put some money into Twitch, then subscribe to people that you like, that you want to actually be able to support a little bit more. I've only got one subscriber emote, but I am going to make some more. I do have follower emotes. I'm not doing too badly. So it means that when you're in chat, you can actually use some of my emotes if you have followed me. There you go. One of the bonuses of following. So if that's Twitch stuff, on YouTube, you can go across and listen to other stories that I've read. and and discover some new things. And if you're like me and love all sorts of information while you're listening to these stories, you can be looking things up and finding out about the way people used to live and the things they used to do and all this sort of stuff. Be excited, learn more, find out about things. All of that stuff. Yeah, there you go. Go for it. Don't just stagnate. Give yourself stuff that keeps your brain alive and active. So, when I'm not here, when I'm not reading to you, but if you have time to, see if there are any other Codex members that you can have a listen to. And if not, then go and read some books for yourself, okay? So we'll see you next time. I read 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 p.m. New Zealand time. And if you're on Twitch, you'll see that in my schedule page. It will actually tell you for your time zone what that is. And we'll see you again then. In the meantime, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the community, and happy reading.